Hello and welcome to part 2 of my video series. I want to thank all of you for your positive reception and support for part 1. It's a pleasure to make content that my viewers enjoy. Quick note, if you haven't yet seen part 1, check the link in the description below. Now let's pick up after we last left off. In the previous video I explained some key elements in character and storytelling in a good versus evil tale. Some examples by using popular movies to get my point across. I also went over the basic structures in a standard good versus evil trilogy in all three films respectively. In this video I'm going to expand on the character elements in the trilogy, what they are supposed to represent, and what makes them so effective in these stories. When I'm done, I'm going to compare said elements to their counterparts in The Last Jedi and determine if they hold up just as well as they should. To start off part 2 by analyzing the role of the mentor.
This is where the fun begins.
The mentor. The role of the mentor carries significant weight in these kinds of stories because he or she represents conventional wisdom and guidance we all need in our lives. The mentor is supposed to take the main hero under his or her wing and generally guide the supporting characters as well throughout the story. The mentor usually uses his or her wisdom and experience in order to choose who to personally undertake because he or she sees the necessary traits the hero needs to become what the mentor aspires. The mentor is the biggest threat to the evil mastermind on the side of evil, so he or she becomes a priority target by the bad guy. This means the mentor has a limited time to teach the main hero and prepare them to one day take his or her place in anticipation of their upcoming death. The mentor doesn't stay around for long, and their send-off has meaning, usually in a sacrificial manner. The loss of the mentor accelerates the character growth in both main hero and supporting cast alike. This is of course impactful to us the audience and the main hero and the supporting characters because none of us know how the main hero is going to pull through without the help of his or her teacher. However, the mentor either dies or steps down eventually to give rise to the next generation who will pass on his or her teachings. The mentor is supposed to eventually be surpassed by his or her student naturally. This is the paradigm set that accents the relationship and the bond the teacher has with the student. The student learns and trains in order to surpass his or her teacher, and in turn to undertake a student of his or her own, only to be surpassed eventually by his or her own student. And that's the way the cycle reaches full circle, a never-ending relationship from generation to generation. Oddly enough, this very example is set by Yoda in The Last Jedi. Now I can understand that a lot of people had a problem with how Yoda was portrayed and used, but when he says, "We are what they grow beyond," he's relaying what I mentioned above. It's a natural order of things. But in Rey's case, Yoda's teachings in this film can't be applied for two major reasons. Number one, Luke in this movie failed to uphold the standards of the mentor, and Rey was a poor student to Luke, who didn't learn from Luke because she was already self-sufficient. And number two, the relationship as mentor and student was dictated by the script of The Last Jedi. You mean to tell me that Anakin Skywalker himself wasn't worthy of the rank of master?
What? Take a seat.
And yet the same Yoda who was present in that session deems that Rey is ready, as she quote-unquote already possesses what she needs because she has the old Jedi text that she took from that tree. This is one of the many character inconsistencies in this film, but Yoda is not the only character who was portrayed like this. Luke is the biggest problem that fans have. The script and creative decisions taken for Luke's character are completely opposite with his personality. Every trait to his character that was built in the original trilogy was basically retconned in The Last Jedi. There is nothing wrong with the act I like to call the old geezer act. You know, the Murtaugh, "I'm too old for this shit" act from Lethal Weapon? Let me fill you in. The classic story of the retired old man or woman who refuses to get back in action, but eventually they find it in themselves to make a badass entrance and get stuff done and kick ass. At first, it seemed Luke was going to be played out like this, but expectations subverted, he did not. Luke was forced to carry out this bitter persona throughout the majority of the film.
Go away!
Fans hoped that Luke's interaction with Rey would eventually get him to come around and kick some First Order ass. However, in The Last Jedi, Rey had to look good, so Luke was purposefully written as this bitter old man that was irredeemable, which is a result of lazy writing overall. Pixar's Cars trilogy, and specifically Cars 3, is focused on the narrative of passing down the torch to the next generation. It's wonderful how the mentor and pupil relationship works between Doc Hudson and an arrogant at first Lightning McQueen, and how it blooms through the rough start of their relationship in Cars 1. Then we have Cars 2, where their bond is at its strongest. Doc Hudson also started off his arc in the series with the old geezer act, but eventually he teaches Lightning McQueen a trick or two about racing later in the series. Cars 3 is an amazing conclusion to that relationship, where Lightning McQueen now takes upon the mantle of mentor to Cruz Ramirez, an aspiring racer, and the mentor-pupil relationship comes full circle. The transition of Lightning's role from student to teacher is done in a realistic and relatable way. This is why it works so well with the audience. How Lightning McQueen's time as a hotshot racer has come to an end, and he, like Doc Hudson before him, is supposed to retire in order to give new light to the next generation of racers. Through his story, he accepts failure and that he won't always remain undefeated. He knows that and that his time will pass, just like Doc before him. The entire narrative of Cars 3 is a beautiful, relatable, and educational story, and it teaches us that we all have our day in the sun, but eventually our time will pass. The way Lightning McQueen steps down and takes Cruz under his wing is done so tastefully and nostalgically that it doesn't take away from his character, nor is he undermined so that Cruz looks good. She needs to earn it just like he did in the past. Before I continue, I can actually see some people looking to score some trigger points from a mile away, so let's get some things out of the way. This comes from Pixar that can squeeze you in the feels gland by using cars with tongues under their hoods and eyes for windshields. 2. Pixar is owned by Disney, the same company that now owns Star Wars, so it's not a company matter. And 3. Cruz is a female protagonist, just like Rey, that bests her male mentor by earning it, unlike Rey, in a conventional sense and not because Rian Johnson or Kathleen Kennedy said so. So, there's that. Another great example of the protagonist that now becomes the mentor is Creed. In this case, Sylvester Stallone's Rocky Balboa, who is a mentor to Creed himself. And although I haven't seen Creed 1 or 2 yet, and I eventually will, I believe that the paradigm of the mentor comes full circle with the whole student thing. I also like the sentiment that Creed sets to us, to be the mentor to the son of the one who was your rival at first, but then your own mentor later in life. Another great example of mentor and one of my personal favorites is the one with a dark past that became disheartened with life. In this case, it's Mr. Han in the 2010 Karate Kid movie with Jackie Chan and Jaden Smith. Here, the dynamic between mentor and pupil shows that even the teacher can learn from the student and can also be helped to heal from whatever it is that is tormenting him or her. The best scene and possibly the most powerful delivery in this movie is when young Dre walks in Mr. Han's garage while he was smashing his family car under the influence of alcohol. Mr. Han tells the story of how he lost his family in an accident and hasn't been able to shake off his grief or guilt ever since. So every year, he commemorates his loss by restoring the family car and smashing it on the date of his accident and getting drunk. Now that's pretty sad, but all this changes when Dre came into his life. Mr. Han sees some sort of redemption in his training with Dre, and it helps him move on later in his life. I know a lot of people don't like this movie very much because it isn't quite true to the original franchise, The Karate Kid, but if you focus on it as a film alone, you can see the bond that the mentor and the pupil have is very strong. Dre even mentioned his training, similar to that of a Jedi Knight in that movie too, which is kind of cool. So from these few examples, we can see that the mentors can come from a pretty dark place too. They're not perfect. They have made mistakes and they have failed in their own rights as well. So by this token, whatever it was that left Luke broken in The Last Jedi, in this case the loss of his students and his temple, and most importantly the way he fell out with his own nephew, he should have begun to heal and restore his faith due to his relationship with his new student, Rey Almighty, via their interaction together. In The Last Jedi, Luke set to teach Rey 3 lessons about the Force. One we got on the big screen, the second was a deleted scene that is featured on Blu-ray that I'm not buying, and the third one was a wait, she left. That's right. The third lesson was cut short because she just decided to leave Octo 2. Rey only trained herself by sparring with a rock, and that was it. Luke barely did anything a mentor should in these films, and that's one of the major problems his fans had in this movie. His teaching he gave about the Force was kind of sterile and not at all on par with what we know about the Force so far in the saga. The Force never belonged to any faction, Jedi or Sith, and none ever claimed to do so in the movies or other media so far. The most common complaint I get from his fans is that, his behavior was kind of off altogether. Yes, I get it, Luke did lose his students and his temple in a purge at the hands of the one he trusted and loved the most, the one closest to him. So as a result, he fled into exile to a remote planet just to die? The fact that a map exists with his coordinates to his exact location in the galaxy. Okay. Nevertheless, Luke has lost it all. He is crushed and devastated by the loss of his students and his nephew. This is one of the basic arguments the Last Jedi defenders use and completely justify Luke's behavior. Now, I don't know if you recall, but a Jedi Master years before Luke experienced the exact same thing: the purge of the Jedi Temple, the death of all the Jedi students within by the hands of the one he trusted and loved the most, the one closest. Do you remember that Jedi? That is correct. That Jedi Master was Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Sure, he fled to Tatooine in self-imposed exile, and he was also devastated and depressed because of what his apprentice had become. Obi-Wan's exile came with purpose, though, even training from Master Yoda himself. Luke and Obi-Wan as mentors share the same story if you put them side by side, but with a major difference. Obi-Wan, as presented to the audience during his youth, in the prequel era, did not diverge from his character as he grew older, meaning that he wasn't that pessimistic old geezer towards Luke when they met in A New Hope. Contrary to that, Obi-Wan encouraged Luke to fight against the Empire and train as a Jedi, thus staying true to his character and being consistent throughout the saga. But this was because of Lucas. He wrote both characters and, the guy who ruined your childhood, and I'm going to expand on that on another day. But imagine Star Wars today if Obi-Wan was like Luke in The Last Jedi. There is no excuse. Obi-Wan lost just as much as Luke, dare I even say more. But when the time came for him to step up and mentor another Skywalker, he didn't hesitate. When he needed to do his part and aid the rebellion, he didn't think twice. That was the purpose of his exile: hope. Unlike whatever Luke represented in The Last Jedi. It certainly wasn't hope. I don't know the lesson there. Even after his death, Obi-Wan still guided Luke throughout the original trilogy. But he never interfered with Luke's decisions despite disagreeing at times. The biggest problem about Luke is his character inconsistency. I think I said that before. I see a lot of articles by some quote-unquote fans out there that say Luke's behavior was perfectly justified. In an established franchise, consistency is the rule of thumb. Any additions to the lore must be explained in-universe, or else it is considered lazy writing that creates plot holes in the movie. It also severely degrades the value of an already beloved character. To those fans I say that if Luke wasn't what he was in the original trilogy, you wouldn't be able to capitalize off his success as a character and gain your precious blue tick mark on Twitter. You guys know who I'm talking about. I'm convinced that they are aware that Luke's portrayal was a problem, and they're just saying stupid things just to get the reactions out of the rest of us. Saying things like Luke was old and that's why he acted this way, blah blah blah. So, Obi-Wan was just as old in A New Hope. Why didn't he act like a cynical old fart? There are so many things to point out about what makes Luke's portrayal so bad in this movie that I'll explain later during the message of The Last Jedi. As a mentor, Luke should have done the traditional test to test Rey at first to determine if she is worthy of the hero status, just as Yoda tested his own patience many years prior in Empire Strikes Back. But the reason Luke was not written as a traditional mentor who passes the torch to the next generation was because it was easier to make Rey look better in comparison, because, reasons. Luke was purposely dumbed down to justify Rey's character. With the passing of the mentor comes a very impactful moment for the protagonist and the audience alike on an evolutionary standpoint for the story. The main protagonist is forced to spread their wings and push on. Obi-Wan's death in Episode 4 was impactful to us despite the very little time we had with him, because he was fulfilling his role perfectly, combined with Lucas's expert writing during his time alive, and still guided Luke through the Force later. His sacrifice had meaning because the audience knew his relationship with Vader, and because he did so to help the others escape the Death Star. Luke's death in The Last Jedi doesn't work for two main reasons. Number one, he wasn't physically on Crate, and no, the lazy excuse I hear from people that say Luke did the most noble Jedi thing by saving lives without the use of violence. Really? Can I remind you Luke's use of violence saved lives in the past and helped contribute to the plot better? Like in the original trilogy?
droid!
Run away!
So cut the crap. This is Star Wars, and I think the wars part of the title implies violence. If you want non-violence, go read some Gandhi, but even he in some instances commended violence when it's necessary. Back to Luke. His send-off and contribution in this movie was as consistent as his character, zero. The same thing with his force projection, it's a total hoax, thinking something is there but it's really not. Not only that, but The Last Jedi is the first Star Wars episode without an actual lightsaber duel, that's ridiculous. Luke, the most anticipated hero in this franchise, should have dueled Kylo Ren, and if he got killed, then his death would have had a lot more meaning than the way he actually died. You know, like some other master who had a showdown with a fallen Skywalker, or in this case, a fallen Solo. The Resistance would escape and Luke again would be deemed a hero in the galaxy for one last time. Then his send-off would have a lot more meaning. All the fans wanted was to see a lightsaber fight between these two, if not Snoke. Oh wait. He's dead. For years, fans have been wondering Luke's power level in the Force and lightsaber combat. Even Yoda's death in Return of the Jedi had impact because he contributed to Luke's training, helping his character arc grow and the plot overall. The fact that Rian Johnson wrote for him to die far, far away from the scene of the battle on Crate paints Luke as a coward. So all this takes from the impact of the mentor's death from the audience. Luke's death doesn't have an impact on Rey either. Nor do we get a reaction from her. She's just, happy. Luke just vanished into thin air. Just like that. No explanation. Just happened. Number 2, anticipation. Fans waited for 34 years to see Luke again on the big screen. After so many comics, books, video games, and other media, fans expected to see Luke in action. Although it's a given the EU material plays it over the top sometimes by showing Luke do some ridiculous and impressive feats, fans got to see nothing, none of that, practically nothing. But he used that force projection ability and took a toll on his body and that's why he died, blah blah fucking blah. As the EU fans already know, Luke already used the force projection ability in the expanded universe, which was a dark side ability by nature, and not only was he able to interact with other people and objects, it never took a toll on his physical health. Did you guys know that? Oh wait, the hero has been dead since 2012. Moving on, but seriously. All fans wanted to see was an older, wiser, and more powerful Luke spark up his iconic green glowing lightsaber and mow down some First Order fodder, do some incredible tricks with the Force, and eventually duel Kylo Ren or Snoke. Was that too much to ask? The Last Jedi was highly anticipated and had this much hype built around it because of Luke Skywalker finally returning in action after the tease in the end of The Force Awakens. If Luke wasn't mistreated as a character and wasn't wasted as an overall mentor in the story, the fans wouldn't have given such a backlash to the creators of The Last Jedi. Luke should have never died in this part of the trilogy. It was too soon. And especially the way he was killed off in this movie, well, it hurt fans a lot. It would have been best to reserve him for episode 9, but what's the point? In some cases, like Gandalf in The Lord of the Rings, the mentor comes back to life, again through believable exposition and in-universe explanations. Conclusion. In conclusion, Luke did not fulfill the necessary criteria needed to represent the mentor in this movie by the good versus evil story standards. His mistreatment more than anything ruins his character and mentor status. I want to be unbiased and I don't want to let any personal feelings for Luke get in the way of my arguments, but Luke was not a good mentor as we all hoped he would be, partially because of how he was written in The Last Jedi, but most importantly because of the lacking relationship he had with Rey, his supposed student. Well guys, this is the end of part 2 and I really want to thank you all for taking the time to watch my video. In part 3, we will analyze the character element that Rey is supposed to represent, the main protagonist. If you enjoyed my content and want to see more of it, please subscribe to my channel and like this video. If you also have Twitter, consider following me at the Prodigal Legion 723, as I enjoy interacting with people on a personal level and exchange opinions and ideas. Most importantly, I'd like to thank my esteemed peers on Twitter, whose interactions have been very encouraging for my channel. Thank you for watching and may the Force be with you.